All right, good afternoon. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah, we still do need a technician in here. I think one of the microphones is working, so we'll give them another minute or two, and if we can get a tech in here, otherwise we'll talk loud. If you're in the room for the bar crawl, you're in the right room. We're going to develop strategy for what we're going to do tomorrow night. So one more minute. Actually, I'll do a quick introduction. Substituting for Jay Kenny today, we've upgraded. We have Ann Ferguson from Alarm.com down on the end. We have Dave Sheffy from Linear Link. I'm sorry, from NAPCO. We have the technician. No, we have the technician.
Is the podium mic's working? Right?
Podium mic is working, and mic number one is working.
And then are they all on? One's
yep.
It's about to get loud.
And we have Avi Rosenthal from Linear Link. Sorry, Avi. And Gordon Hope from Honeywell.
That sounds like it's off. Yep. Hello. There we go. Alrighty.
Ann, are you good? Okay, so the subject is Roadmap of Interactive Services Platforms, Pathways to Profit. My name's Steve Firestone, and I am the Executive Vice President at Select Security. And after spending about 15 years in the industry, back in the 80s and 90s, I left the industry and have come back to the industry about a year ago, a little under a year ago. And having been out of the business from 1999 until about a year ago, I have seen pretty significant changes in one respect in the industry, and that's kind of what the subject is that we're talking about today. And the slide that you see on the screen right now kind of does a comparison between residential market penetration of other what you might consider to be interactive or technology-driven services. And when you look at security at the 19% number residentially compared to those other bars, if we think the number's 19 or we think the number's 25, we clearly have a long way to go in penetrating the residential market. I did some consulting work in the cellular business for a number of years for customers like Nokia and T-Mobile. And I can tell you that our industry, in many respects, in my view, is where that industry was 15 or 20 years ago. Those guys have spent a whole lot of money figuring out how to get the numbers to where the penetration is in their category. And I think with the introduction of interactive services in our business, we're kind of at the beginning of the hockey stick. And you'll see on a coming slide that I think we're already into the hockey stick in terms of growth of the industry. U.S. security alarm revenues grew pretty significantly from the 98 to the 2008 market crash. I think a lot of the growth in the 2000s, the mid-2000s, in some way can be attributed to some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I think with the economy emerging from where we were for a couple years, I think the early trends are that we're going to see an even bigger hockey stick growth in the residential security market. And total RMR among the SDM 100, we talk about hockey stick in terms of growth in the top companies in the industry. We didn't take this chart back into the 80s and 90s, but while the growth was fairly consistent in the security industry, when you look at the growth over the past couple of years, with the emergence of some pretty significant interactive service introductions and companies coming into the industry whose names we've all become familiar with, the door knocking companies, and then the education that they brought to the marketplace with the value of interactive services, so that it's not just a burglar alarm company anymore offering burglar alarm services. I think some of the things that these guys are going to talk about will illustrate that what I refer to as the hockey stick growth that we're looking at in the future for the industry is pretty bright for the industry. And if you're not participating as a dealer in the introduction of interactive services, hopefully by the end of this discussion you'll say it's something I really need to pay attention to. So what we're going to do here today is to, I think, provoke some thought in the room. I've got a series of 6 or so questions that we've talked about briefly in preparation for this. We'll take questions. If you've got a burning question, feel free to raise your hand as a follow-up to something one of these guys may say. If you've got questions that you want to hold to the end, that's okay. But I think as we progress through this, you'll see that there's probably some opportune times for you to just raise your question, and my job is to keep it moving. And if I think the answers are too long or the questions are too long, we'll do a little bit of a course correct. So we'll start with a question. If a dealer decides that they want to begin offering interactive services, what should they consider prior to diving in, and how should they start the offering to set themselves up for success? There's probably not a dealer in the country who's not either in it or thinking about getting in, and if they're not in, they're probably not in because they're a little intimidated by it. So we'll start here closest to me. Gordon, if you'd like to take that question first. What should the dealer consider prior to diving into the interactive space, and how do they set themselves up for success?
That's a good question. We kind of launched some interactive services back starting in 2006, and so we were neophytes in it, just like anybody who never did it before, right? We were selling alarm services, and all of a sudden we were offering a different category of service. It was now more about things that had to look good, things that had to work quickly. It wasn't about the stability of the network. It wasn't so much about the robustness of data security in the eyes of the consumer. So the first thing we had to learn is what I would then share to anybody who hasn't yet done it, which is you're probably underprepared to do it well until you really, really understand what drives a consumer's behavior. I would suggest very strongly that you sit and look internally very seriously and decide how you're going to develop a sales plan. It never ceases to amaze me when you talk to dealers that are successfully doing this. They clearly have sat down, come up with a sales plan, and have figured out how they're going to compensate their salespeople for marketing and selling this type of service out to the consumer. You need a sales plan. You need to remarket your image. If you're going to lead with security, which we all want to do, you're going to somehow have to become relevant to the younger segment. They're going to know more about your company before they call you in than you would ever believe. If you're ever going to get that hockey stick to happen, that hockey stick is not driven on our age. That hockey stick's going to be driven by much younger buyers. So they're better prepared. They know exactly what your company likely can do, and they're going to ask you some very, very fundamental questions about activity. So you got to be prepared for it and have a sales plan. That would be my short answer.
Avi, comments?
Sure. There was a survey done not too long ago where a group of homeowners were asked what type of heating, ventilation, or air conditioning system they have in their home. And the vast majority of those people answered Honeywell, because that's the name on the thermostat. Honeywell doesn't actually make a furnace, right? They don't make too many air conditioning systems. But everybody believes that the brand that they have is the brand that they see every day on their thermostat. And so what I would say for those of you who are looking to get into interactive services is remember that fact. Most of you have been in business for a little while, and you're building your brand locally. You do community outreach. You do the local home show. You may advertise locally. You get involved with your communities. You're building your brand. Most of the interactive services are going to be somebody else's brand. And so you have to figure out a way to differentiate yourself and so that your consumer, your homeowner, knows about you and not just the device or the brand of security that you're selling. A lot of you leverage the big brand names, and that's really great to get your foot in the door. But at the end of the day, you own that customer relationship. So take a hard look at how you want to further that customer relationship and how you want to develop the stickiness of that customer relationship. Because sure enough, if you get that customer signed up for an interactive service, somebody else at some point is going to come and try to convince them that their interactive service is better. And so if you've developed your brand and you've developed the stickiness of your brand and your company with that consumer, they're less apt to go and jump ship to a different kind of device. So build your brand. That's my tip.
Dave?
Well, you know, one of the things that I see, and we've been doing video interactive services for several years now, and only recently have started delivering some of the other interactive services. But one of the things that I see, certainly coming, you know, the tidal wave that's coming, I guess we probably all feel it. I think from the last 2 years, every show, every seminar has really had a lot to do with RMR and increasing the RMR, the remote services that come along with it. And I'm not really sure that we're all prepared. You know, certainly the larger companies are. If I took a look 2 years ago at the top 100 companies, and I went to their websites, and I looked at their websites, and I said, you know, geez, I don't see those services offered, or I don't see an emphasis on those services. And if I, like a few weeks ago, kind of went through that process and went through those websites, and I found a completely different, you know, configuration of those websites. They're very much focused on interactive services. So, you know, if you're not one of those big companies who's focused and has a whole team of people to do those services for you, you kind of have to, it kind of falls on yourself. And, you know, in a lot of cases, and I don't know, I deal with a lot of small dealers. I don't find that every dealer's got a website today. And, you know, as Gordon said, you know, being prepared, having a plan, a lot of my customers today are getting a call from somebody, you know, maybe it's one of their own subscribers, asking them if they provide services that they may have seen on TV. I just got a you know, 1.5-foot flyer from Comcast before I left the house, and you know, the tsunami of information. You don't have to drive very far in any large major city today to see a billboard that's offering you know, interactive home services by a company that has more marketing capability than everybody in this room. We're a small business. It's a cottage business for the most part, but we're going to be, you know, inundated here by a tremendous amount of marketing. And, you know, being prepared, having a plan, understanding what these large competitors are going to bring to the table as far as services, pricing, being competitive with that, but also being able to understand how to be competitive with that in your way. I picked up the phone the other day to call the local tire store, and I went through the yellow pages, and they weren't in the yellow pages. I went to the place, and the guy said, I said, you weren't in the yellow pages. You're a tire store. You're not in the yellow pages. He says, no, we're in the internet. You know, you should have just looked this up on your tablet. The point is, your customers are going to come looking for you. If they can't find you, they could fall prey to another large competitor that they already do business with. That's helping in some way. It's really about marketing yourself to your customers, existing customers.
And Ann, you're last on this one, but probably first on the next one. So any comments to add to this?
No, I certainly agree with the points have already been made. I think one thing that I would say, just to dovetail off of the prior comment, is to recognize that interactive services today, to the vast majority of consumers, increasingly means a truly full offering. What I mean by that is it's not just remote security services anymore. The expectation now, because of the mass marketing Comcast is out there doing, and AT&T Pulse, and Verizon, and the list goes on and on, they are out there marketing the fact to consumers that it's not just about security, it's about the ability to add home automation and energy management and things like that. So when you think about developing an interactive services plan, make sure that it really is a full and complete interactive offering, because that is increasingly what consumers will come to expect. And I think importantly, particularly for new customers that you're going after, really make sure that your sales team is focused on enforcing the fact that you offer all of those services on every single call. Because even if the customer isn't interested in, for example, home automation or energy management today, they've got to know that you offer it. So when, as was mentioned, that Comcast flyer comes in the mail, it's talking about how great it is to tie your thermostat into all of it, they already know that they can get it from you. And then I would just add, I completely agree with the sentiment about not forgetting your existing customer base. It's a fabulous target for you because they clearly there's some existing trust that's already built there. So really think about taking advantage of that. And then the final quick comment I'd make on this is, there's been some good discussion about where and how people are looking to find you. And certainly we all think today about simply having a website, and that's really how people search. And while that's absolutely true, I would say don't forget about some of the other avenues that people are using to find services, particularly local services. So you think about things like Facebook, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to go and hire a social media director or find an agency to run it for you. But what it does mean is that people in your community pay attention to what their friends on Facebook do. If they are looking for a home services provider, they will frequently reach out to a network like that. So even if you don't, let's say, have a really rich website, I would encourage you to think about investing a little bit of time in having a presence in some of the social media outlets that are important in your local area. And again, it doesn't mean having someone full-time devoted to it, but it means having a presence, and as important as anything, just listening and being prepared to respond.
So what I'm hearing you guys say, and nobody used the word, I don't believe, but what I'm hearing you say is the industry's kind of at a transformational stage. And that's scary for any industry. There's probably some people in the room that, they're family businesses. They've been around for a long, long time. They've done things pretty much the same way. They recruited the same way. They train the same way. Their techs that are out there, they're probably very knowledgeable in the traditional, conventional burglar and fire alarm technologies. This is completely different. So, I'll ask the group, and whoever wants to answer first can answer, but in the changing of the business model, how does a dealer measure success, and what are the key elements of operating the business that they need to pay attention to? Because it's easy to say, I want to sell Interactive. Okay, now we've sold it. Now we need to be able to support it. So what are the success metrics, and what are the operational issues that a dealer should think about as they decide to offer Interactive or they decide to push it more? And I'll open it to whoever would like to answer first.
Sure, I'll take that one just briefly. I think one of the most important things that we see at Alarm.com when we look at those dealers in our community that are particularly successful, and by success we mean not only growing in terms of adding new customers, but having customers that are very actively engaged, right? So they are logging on, they are utilizing notifications, they are setting up rules, they have multiple services. That's really how we define really worthwhile customers. We know those customers stay on longer and are generating greater RMR. To really make that happen, there's one very fundamental thing that we see, and that is that installation has got to equal activation. Cannot let the technician leave the home without getting the customer to log in for the first time. Because the likelihood of the customer doing that on their own once that person has left appears to be pretty darn low. So, and I know that's a difficult thing to say because any additional time that installer is spending on site is time that they're not spent generating revenue at the next location, but some training spent on that to make sure that they can help somebody get started, coming up with a few scenarios that could be easily and quickly applied to a large swath of customers could seem to be very successful.
Dave?
Well, I think one of the things is, and it's obviously product selection, is important, but this is a lot of new technology for a lot of people. Certainly we've been doing the video for a long time, and the success of that really comes, from the repeat installations. We probably, we've been doing the video, I would honestly say, much longer than anybody, but there were a few years there in the very beginning that were kind of difficult because of the connectivity. Connectivity issue, I think, for everybody is pretty good today, and that's really not a factor. But somebody within the organization or everyone within the organization goes out and works on the system, has to be technically astute to be able to bring that customer up to the level of knowledge of using the system. It's kind of surprising that, a number of years ago we did a lot of surveys, and we found that a very large part of our existing security customers don't use their system on a regular basis. And, it just kind of leaves you up to a situation where if they're not using the security system, they don't want to pay for the system, or ultimately don't want to pay for the system. What we find is, with the video specifically, our attrition levels are down, especially when video usage is up. Because I'm not sure who said it, but they talked about sticky. And, all of these things, take any application that you have on your phone. You probably all have a smartphone today, and you have a number of applications. I don't have any applications that actually genuinely impact my lifestyle. I mean, it might be funny, might give me something to read, might give me a flashlight. But the fact is what we're offering here to the customer, the subscriber, is really something that positively impacts their lifestyle. And if they're using it, we're still a word-of-mouth business. And this device, this smartphone, this tablet, last week, it was said that in 2015, tablets are going to outsell desktop computers. So that go everywhere, do everything kind of mentality, everybody's taking it with them. Whether you want to turn the alarm system off in the middle of the day for some odd reason, I had it happen to me. Roofers were working on the house, tripped it, turned it off. It was a beautiful thing. There's value in that. You don't get a lot of value from applications, especially free applications, but not that they're free, we pay monthly, but there's value in what we're providing. And so, being able to retain customers, to grow customers, and the opportunity here is to utilize the marketing that I talked about earlier and grow your business, piggybacking on the marketing, like we've all, grown our business on the ADP's marketing over the years. Now it's going to be that times 10.
So how do you answer the question, and either of you two can take this if you'd like, but how do you answer the question, yeah, but I don't have techs who understand this. My techs are great at, the old burglar and fire alarms, but they don't know anything about HVAC controls. And, how do you address that issue? Because there's seminars up and down the hallway about, educating your workforce. How do we address that issue relative to interactive?
Unfortunately, that's really what you have to do. You have to invest in your workforce. To go back just a brief step, when I was a dealer, we used to measure success in new construction because we do an entire development, right? You'd ink the deal with the development down in Florida, and we pre-wire every house, and then we go door to door and we get everybody signed up. And so that was the way we measured success. And in this market where the builder market isn't quite back yet, a lot of the way that you can measure success is in how many referrals did you get last month. If you're doing your jobs properly and you're offering the right services at the right price with the right products, chances are somebody out there, one of your customers, is showing off their smartphone to their neighbor and saying, wow, look what I just got, right? Because everybody loves to show off their new technology. You talk about an app to change your life. Clearly he doesn't play much Angry Birds because, it changed a lot of lives out there because people, that's all they did, right? Well, the reason why that worked was because if you saw somebody engrossed in their phone doing something, you wanted to know what was engrossing them. Now, I'm not going to equate for a moment the fact that we can get an interactive service to the extent that Angry Birds is, but when you can do things like that, when you know what's going on in your home and you show it off to your neighbor, a question that I would ask the group is how many of you incent your current customers to give you a referral for a new customer? That's a powerful way, right? Because nobody is going to do as well a selling job as a happy customer. No salesman can ever sell as well because there's always this, he's a salesman, so of course he's selling it. But a happy customer does an incredible job at selling it. So a good way to measure your success rate is how many referrals you get. To go back now to the workforce, the gating factor in all of these interactive services has always been the fact that there is probably, out of all of you sitting in the room, not too many high voltage electricians. All right, there may be a few of you, but for the most part, if you're in the security business, you don't hold a high voltage license. Now, it's a lot of fun to talk about interactivity and a lot of fun to talk about home automation, but at the end of the day, the good chunk of the devices that you have to install require a different kind of license than the one you have today. So you have two choices. In some markets, it's not too difficult to go out and find yourself that license. Whether you buy it from somebody else or you partner with somebody, you can get that license. In other markets, if there's anybody here from Missouri, for instance, you can go out and you can actually get that license very easily. So there are different ways that you can do it. But without that technology, without that level of understanding within your workforce, unfortunately, you're going to be blocked out of being able to sell some of these interactive services. Now, that's actually an opportunity for the little guy to take advantage of the big guys. There's very few cable technicians out there with high voltage licenses. There's very few telecommunication companies out there with high voltage licenses. So although we are getting ready to take advantage of the fact that the tsunami is coming, and that the AT&Ts and the ADTs and the Comcasts and the Verizons are all going to start pumping millions of dollars worth of advertising into our marketplaces, which is great for all of us, by the way. You should not be afraid of that. That's a good thing. Because it is so gratifying to me when I go to a dinner party now and people ask me, what do I do for a living? And I say, I make home automation equipment. Well, when I first started in this business and I said that, they sort of looked at me like, you do what? Nobody understood that. Now, oh yeah, that's like that Verizon commercial I saw, or the Comcast commercial, right? They're raising the level of dialogue in the country about home automation. But the difference is they have unions to deal with. They have national labor forces to deal with. They have heavy-duty regulations to deal with because they're very large companies. You have an advantage. The advantage is that you can walk down the street to a buddy of yours that happens to be an electrician and partner with him and be able to install more services per homeowner than the big guys can. By educating your workforce, by partnering with the local HVAC contractor, by partnering with the local electrician, right? Everybody's now starting to get busy again, which is a good thing, right? The recession is finally, it looks like it may be behind us, and the building business is certainly starting to come back. But don't overlook the fact that there are a lot of guys out there that are still not working at the same level they were pre-recession. And so they're looking for opportunities to be able to keep their guys busy. And this is a prime opportunity for them to keep busy. Because although your workforce may not know how to swap out a thermostat or a light switch, I can guarantee there's somebody in your community who does. And it's a heck of a lot easier for you to partner with them, small businessman to small businessman, than it is for an AT&T to roll into town and decide, hey, we want to be your partner.
So I look at it and I'm trying to picture this from 30,000 feet because I don't think that much has changed. I agree with the whole of comments. I just don't think that much has changed relative to a small company trying to compete against the bigger guy, right? All that's really changed, if you want to really break it down simply, is there's more toys in the attic that are being layered out that you have to contend with. You have two choices to make. You can either say, I don't need it. I can live on core security, which I doubt would be your summary judgment in any regard. Or you can look at it and say, nothing's really changed significantly. I mean, Pulse did a wonderful thing for the industry. It took an attack position on the cable industry getting into the security space. To ADT's credit, they saw it early and got out there before before it really became the tsunami. The good news for all of us is that they're lending credibility because they're already based on life safety, and that brand name means something in security. Comcast doesn't, AT&T doesn't, Verizon doesn't, et cetera, but ADT does. So, number one, we should all thank ADT because they got out there first. The second thing we should do is realize that we're small companies competing against the bigger company. The advantages you'll always have if you're doing things well is you should be more nimble. You can provide better service. And clearly, the idea of just asking the question of any of us, we're all consumers. Ask our own kids. Ask yourself, would you want security to be the quad play of what you currently pay $150 a month for? And if you yourself can't answer that question emphatically, yes, I can't wait to take Cablevision and pay them 20 more bucks a month to do it, you've answered your own question. Now the only question is, if you're running your own business, bring it back internally and say, how am I going to market? What's my credo? The most successful companies that have made this transition started it from the top. They didn't trickle into it. They started it from the top down with a directive. And they said, our company is going to market this way. I mean, take, for example, alternate communications. Telephone lines are coming out. That's not new news to anybody in the room. Why are some companies so much more successful at marketing alternate communications than others? It's because they sat down and they said, here's how you're going to do it. Here's how we market our image. This is how we go to market. We sell these services. This is what we charge. We upsell from here, and everybody says the same thing, the same way, the same time, and they measure success each customer at a time. Clarity in a market that's changing is a strategic advantage. Just focus and get your plans. There's a world of opportunity. I'd rather be in a warm company today than any other day in prior history, because everything's bubbling up. And when there's change, the companies that see it can seize it and grow faster than the ones that sit still. It's a great opportunity right now.
Great segue to my next question. So let us inside your executive leadership team discussions in your companies. And what has surprised your organizations in a positive way that a service or a product you're offering in this space just absolutely killed it in a good way that surprised you? And the flip side is, what has disappointed you from a product that you thought that the marketplace would embrace that it hasn't yet embraced? And whoever.
Sure. Well, nobody wants to take that one.
Go ahead.
I would say a product that has really surprised us in terms of not only how rapidly it's been adopted, but how much it's driven customer engagement and the impacts that we've seen on reduced attrition has been something that we came out with about a year ago called the image sensor. And I won't spend much time on the product itself, but the image sensor is it's a completely wireless. It replaces the standard motion sensor. It's also got a camera built into it. What it did, I think, really harkens back to something that Dave mentioned, is that it brought that visual connection for someone it right into their hands. You know, someone who might not, let's say, be ready for video services, either because they've got a privacy fear or because they believe that it still might be too costly for them, it gives them the opportunity to not just know that their child came home from school at 4:02, but to see it. And that is so, so powerful for people. And that's the kind of thing that you're pulling out and showing at the dinner party. You know, that's the sort of thing that did my babysitter's boyfriend come over? You know, why did the door just open? Wasn't supposed to. And you can see what happened. You know, that's been incredibly powerful. And so I think what that tells us is that there is still a tremendous amount of headway in visual services. And I think probably a lot of upsell opportunity into video services will come out of the image sensor, because people really get hooked on that visual connection. I think that's been really powerful for people. You know, in terms of things that maybe haven't taken off quite as quickly as we might have hoped or we might have anticipated, I'd probably say that there's a little bit of that around energy management services. There's no question that there is a tremendous amount of increased interest in that, and we are seeing great numbers and great growth there. I think that the biggest challenge that we've got, and it's a challenge that I certainly say that at Alarm.com we have with our dealer community, and I'm sure our dealer community therefore has with consumers, is really trying to explain the breadth and depth of the energy management offering in a simple, clear, and concise way. Because there are a lot of really fantastic tools out there that are helping, you know, that it's not just about the smart thermostat, it's about genius level energy management services for a home, you know, but really helping to explain that to a consumer is something that I think we, sitting on this side of the table, have got to figure out how to help the dealer community do even more. Because I think, you know, your slide that was up showing that I think energy management was about 4%. You know, everything tells us that number is growing. And I think to Gordon's point, you know, the market that we see coming up for our services, it's a green generation. You know, they're very focused on their services. At least they think they want them. So I think it really becomes incumbent on us to make sure that we can tell that story as a part of the security offering. Because I think the ability to be able to control energy management within the home, it is truly a mission critical service for the home, and that's what we believe interactive services are all about. It's really being able to control all those mission critical services within the home.
Who'd like to add to that?
Well, I guess I'll add to that a little bit. You can go back historically from the video side of the business, and we talk about the use of video. Over the first 3 or 4 years, you had a connectivity issue. You had cable, you had DSL. You had a lack of a really knowledge base of putting the product in. I think we thought that there was going to be a lot of immediate success to that at that time, but it wound up that not everybody had the skill set to go out to every home and IP address, open ports, nor did they want to get into a consumer's computer system and take on that liability. So it took a number of years, and in any kind of product you're bringing to market, especially at that point. I mean, back then you didn't even have auto learning routers and things, so everything was a little bit more technical. Today you're going back and you're reestablishing what someone tried, and they have to retry it again to find some success with it. What's happening is the success. People's idea of video. You have events, okay, and a lot of the video that we all do, you have an event instead of a full-time recorder. Well, eventually you add a full-time recorder, so you're recording full-time. And once the recorder was added full-time, and once the wireless was well vented, and once you've created all of these components that better create a situation where the installer goes out and puts in a trouble-free system, now all of a sudden it becomes incredibly sellable. And then you turn around and you add all of those other services, whether it's the Z-Wave thermostat, the Z-Wave door lock, and what you've done now is you've taken the control, which has been primarily used for security up until this point, and you've given that control the opportunity to do anything you want to with it. So if you open a door and your daughter comes home from school, she puts her code in, that specific code allows you to take video and send it to mom. And you can take any input off of the control panel, and most everybody's product today, to create an action from. So those things are, one, I think we all have to, get our hands around that and to find out, just how sellable it is. For us, it's pretty new. But now you've got an opportunity that an event is actually not just a pixel-based motion event. It's actually an event that occurred in alarm, while armed away, or when your daughter came home from school, or when somebody got in the pool. There's just so much today that you can put together to create a sellable situation, because every consumer is looking for something different. And previously a lot of it was really notification or the ability to arm and disarm. Now we've taken that and we've exploded what you're going to be able to provide to the consumer, giving you really endless possibilities.
So, very simply, from Linear's point of view, the biggest surprise that we've had, most of you may not realize that Linear is one of the largest suppliers of personal emergency response systems in the industry. We supply about half of the devices that go out there, the old, push the button, help, I fall and I can't get up. We were really expecting that industry would have evolved a little bit further into digital health by now. And we've had product out for quite a while, thinking that it was finally going to take off, and it hasn't taken off as quickly as everybody. There's a lot of talk about it, but there's not a lot of practical application for it. So that was sort of our biggest surprise on the downside. The biggest surprise on the upside is the twilighting of 2G. I think that if 5 years ago you had surveyed this group and asked them whether or not AT&T was going to go dark on the 2G spectrum within 5 years, everybody would have looked at you like you were crazy. How could they even do that? It's it's rock solid, it's foundational. And clearly we're seeing a twilighting of the 2G spectrum much faster than we ever expected. And so there are a lot of companies out there, Linear being one of them, that are taking advantage of the fact that because the 2G spectrum is going away, we're bringing out products to be able to replace all of those radios that exist in the marketplace. So that's a surprise in a good way.
Okay, so the only thing I would disagree with, and I respect that input, I for one, did not expect 2G to be any further longevity out there than it actually is. So I personally didn't expect it to last 15 years the way AMPS did. There was plenty of reason and indicators that we were going through an escalation of changes in technology. It didn't really surprise me. I didn't like it, okay? None of us like it, but it didn't surprise me. To kind of give you the thing that kind of surprises me is where we are right now on one aspect of video. And I don't know where it's going to go because I think we're all in the middle of it right now, which is the thing we call video alarm verification, right? If we look at that, when we talk about video, there's no question from any of us here that when you take out an iPad or an iPhone and you show a consumer video something, video anything, it creates the oohs and ahs, no question. Sometimes it's challenging to convert that oohs and ahs into a successful business venture for yourself because either for training or whatever other reasons may be involved in each of the companies. But I do find it challenging, and we haven't walked through this landmine yet, of human rights to privacy, the love for video, and the desire for the core security industry to try to reduce false alarms by using that technology. And some data points which confuse the heck out of me is you'll talk to people anecdotally that'll say, I'm all for the technology, I get it. Cameras can be in my house, no problem, I get it, right? I'm going to remotely look in, but it's also good that we could use that to help prevent and reduce false dispatches, regardless of how that was accomplished. And on the other side, there's a railing, violent other side to the argument, which says you'll never put a camera in my house. And the two are polar opposites. So as we see video technology getting strongly ingrained commercially, and for the fun stuff for notifications residentially, I do question, and it does one that has a big question mark in my mind is, even for just Honeywell, is how we're going to go through this video alarm verification issue and opportunity together and drive it through residentially where many, many, many of the false alarms are generated. So that would be. So
follow up to that is the, and I'll use your term, I'll never put that camera in my house. Is that a generational issue for the group? Or is it not generational?
Not generational. My sons.
There are some people who are just more sensitive than others.
Yep. It's not age related, that I can guarantee you.
Okay.
No, and especially with some of the news as of late that we've all seen the fact that it seems more and more like Big Brother is watching. My opinion is
we are recording this session, by the way.
And there you go. No matter where you go, if you look the biggest tell for me, other than this NSA thing, and we won't get into politics, but the biggest tell for me was when the bombing happened during the Boston Marathon. Okay, instantly there were 20, 30 different camera views that authorities were able to use, and there were now in that tragic event. Obviously, it was a good thing, but there were people sort of looking from the sidelines, saying to themselves, "There are that many cameras on the average street corner." Right? Because you're not even talking about television, you're talking about surveillance. You're talking about, whether it's an ATM camera or a traffic camera or and I think it opened people's eyes a little bit to the numbers and the level of surveillance that's going on the average street corner. And there's a little bit of backlash to that. There's, just a few people who sort of look at that and go, wow, that's a lot of people watching what I'm doing on a daily basis. And so I don't think it's generational. I just think some people are more sensitive to it than others. That's all.
Go ahead, Ann.
I certainly would agree with that, and I think what that means for us is that we've got to figure out quite clearly ways to make video really work in the home for consumers. So what does that mean? It means making video even smarter for consumers. I think an example of that would be something that we've developed exactly based on this kind of feedback that we've heard from people, and that is the ability to tie geo services into video. So what it means is that if you've got video rules set up, so that let's say you record any video that happens based on motion in your living room, and that is a wonderful thing, and you want to be able to capture that when you are not at home. But when you come back into the home, which we know based on your geolocation, you want to suspend that rule, right? Because you don't want a picture of you walking across your living room in your underwear, right? Or anybody in your home doing that, because we saw that get posted not too long ago too. So, but doing that in such a way that allows the consumer to not have to think about it. They don't have to turn something on and off every time they leave the home. I think that's just an example of a way that we can start to make video services much more easily usable for consumers, and hopefully that helps to drive an increase in adoption because people start to become a little bit more comfortable with it.
So every manufacturer and every service provider, regardless of the industry, is reluctant to give a sneak preview into what the R&D and marketing departments are working on. But I've asked these guys to give us their perspective on a sneak preview. So what is your organization working on that the audience would say, well, that's pretty cool? And I know you all want to go first on this one.
Well, I guess I could go first. It's we've just recently introduced iBridge, so it's down the road. If you're looking at a year down the road, we've got a lot of additional products that come out to continue to support that. A number of video products and some of the rules and different things that you have are already in place. You have a lot of we because of our basis in video. You have a lot of video additions, whether it's recording capability, going off-site to the cloud for that recording capability, incorporating in a more effective and cost-effective way the traditional analog cameras, also delivering more high-def products. Additionally, when we talked, I think the question said kind of disruptive. I don't know that it's disruptive. I think it's really productive. But our system doesn't require a touchscreen, and the fact that you can go backwards 10 years on products that may have been installed 10 years ago, and add a module, the cost of a keypad or the installation time of a keypad to provide these Z-Wave locking, climate control, these services. Very cost effectively to go back and work the existing customer base that you have, the subscribers that you have, I think is incredibly important because it winds up, it's a great opportunity to go back and upsell the existing customer for really little or no cost, and increase your RMR. I guess that's the big part about this. And if you sit down and you run some numbers and you show increasing, whether you had 1,000 accounts or you have 10,000 accounts, if you can increase your RMR on 10% of those, it has an incredible impact on the bottom line. So all of these services, as you can continue to improve the services delivered and provide, I think the full-time recording for us a year or so ago, and then now, the future, delivering that video off the site for recording, allows us to do these RMR services for a lot less upfront cost and a lot less hardware. Less hardware means less installation time and less cost. So getting this down to where you're simply putting in a module, and really no additional installation time and very little additional cost, allows you the potential for a fair amount of revenue.
Come on, Honeywell's a little company. Let us inside.
All right, so there's two macro trends that keep me up at night, but that are also an opportunity for us meaning the industry. I think Honeywell's just like any other company running a network business. I look at it from the standpoint of where is the network business, where's the business of networking going to be in the next 5 to 10 years? And then look at it from the outside in. And instead of us looking at it from the inside out saying, well, I'm going to add this widget, I'm going to add this camera, I'm going to add that, whatever it is, and I'm going to build the services from the inside out. I want to try to project where that network's going to be and how people in this room are going to be able to take advantage of networks in general and what they're going to expect from networks of the future to help them run their business. So to me, the networks are going to have to start providing additional levels of services, not just consumer services, but to help businesses run their businesses more effectively. So one thing I'd love to see is the network to be able to do more to help take cost out of the people who partner with Honeywell's products and services. Don't have all the answers, but are there ways the network can behave for both customers and the B2B side, which helps reduce costs? That's one. The second thing is that you want to know what keeps me up at night, and also is an opportunity at the same time. They're very, very diametrically opposed. Big data, which everybody, if we ever have to hear about another acronym that you want to puke on, big data would be the one. And then on the other side is cyber. So you sit down in Washington, D.C., and you go and you listen to government officials talk about what the NSA is doing on preventing cyber attacks. And you take a look at the focus of this country on trying to secure data. Then on the other side, you take a look at our industry and every other industry that's IT related, and they talk about big data, and they want to capture data, and HTML5 is all about data. Everything is about data. Now, those two are diametrically opposed. One of them over here says you want to share data because that's where you're going to get a tremendous benefit. And on the cyber side, you want to lock everything down because you don't want people taking your data. So what keeps me up at night is how we can find the role of a network, define it professionally so that the network itself is safe, but that it's participating in helping add value by sharing data. And it is not going to be a trivial period of time. The next 5 to 10 years in global networking is going to be really, really crazy. There's going to be more focus on data security, locking things down while at the same time trying to pull and extract data and put it anywhere, anytime, anyplace, instantaneously with smarts. And those two are diametrically opposed. It's just my opinion.
Avi, Ann, want to add anything?
Well, I can tell you from Linear's perspective, as we look towards the future, there's a few things. The first one is personalization. For those of us who went through the pains of home automation in the industry for the last 20 years, when the devices first came out, whether they be the really high-end or some of the niche products that don't exist today anymore, they expected the consumer to fit into their thoughts, their forms, their idea of what home automation was all about. You had very little opportunity in user interfaces and things to modify what those devices did, how they acted, even what they look like. The difference today is those high-end systems, it's all about personalization. What sets apart a high-end automation system from a low-end automation system is your ability to configure it to the exact specifications that the consumer wants. All right, you want to pay $100,000 for a Crestron system, it damn well better be the color screen that you want it to be. Well, it's no longer just about the high-end systems anymore. We're looking at personalization at a much more mass market level. And so it's less about what the interface looks like on your smartphone and more about what you want the interface to look like on your smartphone. It's less about the size and shape of the display and more about what you want the size and shape of the display to look like. And so we're looking at opportunities to personalize these systems to give the dealers more differentiation, to give the dealers more opportunity with their consumers, because the other thing that consumers like to do is pay for personalization. You look at your apps, you look at your phones, you look at all of the various accessories and things. I mean, think about it. The most expensive hunk of plastic that you buy on any regular basis is a case for your iPhone. Who would have ever thought you're going to pay $25 for a hunk of plastic that wraps around a phone? All right? But most people every day do that. So personalization is very important in this day and age. People love Facebook and they love all of their applications, and they want to make them look like what they want to. And so we're looking at driving personalization from that perspective. The other thing is to get you more connected to more devices in your home. So we've already picked the low-hanging fruit, right? We've picked lighting, we've picked energy management and thermostats, we picked door locks, but we're just scratching the surface. There's a whole host of things that we haven't gotten to yet in your home that we want to give you the ability to control. And today, a lot of times in the mass market, those opportunities are very separate. Sonos controls the audio-video of your home, right? Alarm.com is going to control the alarm system and the energy management in your home. NAPCO is going to do the video. Honeywell does a whole host of services on their own. But today, there's really no ubiquitous single point of information or contact for all the different devices in your home. So imagine a common language. Imagine something that would enable you to take these disparate systems and bring them all down to a common denominator without having to put some massive processor or gateway in your home in order to do so. Stay tuned.
So we have about 5 minutes before I'd like to open it up for questions. I've got one follow-up question, but Ann, do you want to comment on?
Sure. Just the
Please.
last thing that I would throw into that is that certainly at Alarm.com we're very focused on driving innovation in the consumer space, but one of the areas that we are, I think, most excited about in terms of upcoming service offerings are additional tools for our dealer community so that they can be more nimble and so that they can start to take better advantage of a lot of the opportunity that we've been talking about up here today. So, and Gordon might not like me for this, but we're actually very excited about the big data opportunity because we think that we can deliver some business intelligence tools that will allow the dealer community to be much smarter and much more highly targeted in their sales efforts so that you are spending a lot less time on your selling and you're being able to be much more effective at it because you know exactly where to find the right targets, what neighborhoods to hit, for example. You can look at your existing customer base and help you know exactly who is the right upsell target for video services because of their current activity or perhaps lack of activity in certain areas. So really trying to provide that information back to you in a very easily digestible and manageable format is something that we are highly focused on and really excited about.
Just so I'm clear, I don't disagree with anything she said. So my comment was more about the difference between big data requirements and desire, which I fully agree, totally agree, that it's required and it's going to be a pull from everybody in this room and every business in the country. Worldwide, it's going to be a pull on the network business. No question. I was just saying, as much as I'm excited about big data, the big data, if you look at big data all over here on the right side of the room, everybody looks at big data, they see opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. And if you park big data over there and then walk to the other side of the room and look at cybersecurity, the blood drains out of your face, okay? So all I'm suggesting is I'm excited about big data as much as anybody else. I'm also concerned about what this world is going to be like, trying to preserve itself with networks as they get more complicated, with more sophisticated software, and we have countries that are basically already snooping everybody's networks and taking data from it now. So you take that issue on one side and big data on the other, which I think is wonderful. And my only point was I think we're going to have to figure out how to balance the two, that's all. But I agree with everything she said.
So my last question, and we didn't rehearse this question at all. So if you believe the statistics on the slides and you believe what everybody here is saying, that interactive is kind of changing the industry, if we're 5 years from now or 10 years from now, what's the residential penetration rate in this country? Because there are some who say 40% is realistic.
40%, yeah, that's the number.
Yeah, I think you have to define what the term, what's the residential security market mean? Because some of the research, and everybody else has got research that's all similar, right?
Yep.
Whether you argue it's 19 or 22, 23% penetration, I would say core security 22, 23%, right? The next biggest, believe it or not, the next biggest segment was another 20% that one time bought one of your security systems and canceled. Okay? That's 40%. Then you got 60% of the people that probably wouldn't buy a core security offering at all. Core security, right? So we're all trying to get that hockey stick to go get that other 80%. We can choose to get it by going back to customers who once bought from us, that 20%, and encourage them again by saying, hey, Mrs. Jones, the first time I sold you something, I didn't have some cool stuff. Now I have some cool stuff. You already understand security, so you know the value proposition. You were once a security buyer and valued it. Step up and now I'll give you some other services. One way to help get to that 40%. The other is taking advantage of the Comcast and the cable industry's infrastructure marketing into the consumers, creating awareness first for security light type applications, and then pulling them into deeper ones. Kind of like the video system, where you start with something small and then bring it into a full-blown video system afterwards. 40%, yeah, it's possible. Everybody in this room is going to have to change the way they market if they're going to participate in that growth, because that's the big challenge, is mindset.
And I know you guys look at this all the time. What's the number 5 years from now?
I would not disagree with that. I mean, I think 40% is certainly achievable, but I think that completely agree with Gordon's comments, and I think the most important thing he said is that in order to achieve that, we've got to change the way that we not only market, but the way that we sell, because it's the buyer that helps us get to 40% is not always going to be a core security buyer. It's going to be someone who might primarily be interested in home automation, and security is a good add-on for them, but they weren't primarily a security buyer. And I think recognizing that is critical, and that certainly leads to a change in our marketing activity. It leads to a change in, and we see this, right? ADT knows this, for example. Look at the change in their advertising just over the last 2 years. It's no longer the person in the hooded sweatshirt banging through the glass of the back door, because that's not what's selling today. Today, it's the smiling mother who's walking the stroller down the street, who pulls out her handy smartphone and locks the door if she forgot to. I mean, very, very different sort of feel to it. But there is that recognition that it is a different buyer that's likely going to help us get to that number.
Okay, let's open it up for questions. Anybody have it back of the room?
Yeah. So how do you deal with the liability issues? Not only do we get service calls if someone did commit a theft, but what happens when we're now installing a Z-Wave or wireless thermostat and now integrating lifestyle systems, and the client has an issue, the heating doesn't work or their AC doesn't work? You're still getting the calls. And not only are you getting the call, but you also have a liability.
Yeah, so let me add to that. I've heard reluctance from dealers that I got a great reputation in the community and I do what I do well, and now the industry is saying I'm a dummy if I don't do interactive services, including heating and HVAC controls. But now I'm jeopardizing my reputation in the community. How do you guys address that question?
Well, I think the easiest way to do it, like it was mentioned, you partner, because realize if you don't sell the interactive service on the air conditioning system, the air conditioning guy is going to more than likely come up behind you and sell an interactive service out from under you. There's actually a gentleman sitting right there that represents 14,000 HVAC professionals in the United States that are all being trained and all being educated to sell interactive services. There's a division of Nortec, the company that owns Linear, called Nordyne, and they are also educating their 8,000 dealers across the country to do interactive services. So, like Ann said, security may not be the hot button for your customer, maybe energy management is, but security is going to come on along. If you want to participate in that interactive service, if you want to be part of that recurring revenue model, then you have to be willing, to a certain extent, to either take the risk or partner with somebody who you trust. So if you are reluctant to expand your business, realize there is probably somebody in your community who's more than happy to take on that risk if you don't.
Yes, sir. In front.
Question. It has to do with margins. Realizing that this is titled Pathway to Profit, higher RMR doesn't necessarily mean higher margins. Mm-hmm. How do you speak to those folks that have been in the basic security business and may have a 10% expense on what they're paying the central monitoring station, and then when you tier all these other expenses to get interactive, it may now be 40%. And how do you balance that? How can you compete?
Well,
that type of change?
that's a good question, and I think it's different for every company because they may be getting services different ways from different vendors and providers. But at the end of the day, I think the first thing we all have to come to grips with is whether we like it or not, the days of the POTS line being the free connectivity service are over. Like, they're over and dead. So if any of us were looking at a P&L based on the fact that the phone was going to be paid for by the consumer to dial it, and you were going to walk away and collect $30 a month, and look at that P&L and the op profit on that, boy, I'd love to go back to those days too. I think it'd be great if I was a dealer, but I just don't think it's realistic. The phone lines are dead, regardless of what VoIP does. For us as security professionals, we're going to rely on alternative technologies, whether we like it or not. And we're going to be faced with getting a little smarter about how we position. Our technicians are going to have to get some basic educational training on what is IP and maybe something about a radio, right? Beyond that, I think you will see the evolution of services and the technology continue to mature and its prices continue to come down. In 2006, when we were offering basic services, they were 3.5 times as expensive as they are right now, right? And so, yes, you're paying a little bit more, but you're getting significantly more for that little extra money than you would have gotten even just 4 years ago. So I think it's the reality of what we face. The consumer is going to see value and pay for it. But if you don't have the, and I'll use the word courage, if you don't have the courage to reposition that dollar, if you're used to being at $24.95 when customers are paying $150 for cable, you're going to have some courage to go in there at $35 or $39. It takes courage, but you're correct. When you do the P&L, you're going to have to, there is additional cost to get these services. I can tell you for a fact, Honeywell is disproportionately investing millions to build these services with an ever-decreasing curve of them coming down. So I can tell you we're all in. It's not an easy world we live in. And so we're doing the same thing you're doing. We're trying to get additional profit for the company, investing intelligently, but we realize that the curve of pricing wants to bring it down. So I would say jump in, the water's fine.
I understand that,
but it's tough.
From a consumer perspective, I don't think they'll ever pay the price point to reach that same gross margin.
No, but they're already paying substantially more. The average recurring revenue numbers, Vivint, for instance, is commanding, sometimes $60, $70, $80 a month from their customers. So their margins are definitely built in. Their margins are definitely higher. In their case, they have an overburdened hardware cost, right? Because they give away the hardware, which I don't recommend as a business model, but certainly it is successful for some. But there's no doubt that the threshold of paying for the consumer and paying for recurring revenue has increased. Whereas it used to be $24.95 was sort of the median where everybody was for standard alarm signal processing. I would say that number is probably coming down. Right? You've got some of these internet guys out there these days that are willing to do it for less. But if you build the value in, Alarm.com, for instance, has an interactive service that allows for energy management, and you can show a cost savings based on their energy management. So you then have an opportunity to upsell. You look at what AT&T is going to charge per month. You look at what Comcast is charging per month. You look at some of the other players out there. The trend is going up. Now, you're in the catbird seat. Gordon mentioned that Honeywell is investing millions of dollars. Linear is doing the same thing. We have a service coming out called Linear Link, where we're investing millions of dollars in unfortunately, at the moment, a decreasing revenue model. But we all recognize the fact that we have to provide those services. Each of us, every time there's a new entrant into the interactive services model, whether it be iControl, whether it be Cellular, Uplink, Linear, right, we're all going to compete in that marketplace, and we're all going to drive those prices down for the players that are already in the marketplace. But what's not happening is the consumer is not seeing a reduction in their price. So you as the dealer are reaping the reward of us catfighting, if you will, in the street for every dealer.
Well, not to take any more time, but the example I was going to use is iControl. In our footprint, I happen to be one of the bad guys. I'm into telecommunications work. In our footprint, they've introduced iControl at $31.95. And the cost to the person that's, if you were going to deal with that, it's about a $13 a month expense.
But they've introduced
Take
it
the
through
cost.
whom, right? Because iControl doesn't sell direct. Who have they introduced it through?
Someone.
Time Warner. Okay, but Time Warner is subsidizing that number, right? Because it's a quad play for them. So $34.95 for
Well,
them.
you have two services, that's what
Yeah.
the price point is.
Right.
But still, when you look at the cost of the equipment and the cost of the monthly expense to get all that interactive stuff, and then iControl, as you well know, unlike Honeywell and Alarm.com, have a relationship with both, is that it's not stacked. You pay for all of it, whether the consumer uses it or not.
Right.
So it's very difficult to compete in that space from a margin perspective, relative to just plain security. It doesn't mean you don't have to,
Right.
because that's where everybody's heading.
Right.
But
Well,
our RMR, I guess my point is, our RMR does not necessarily mean that I'm a problem.
There are alternatives too.
Yeah.
I mean, there are alternatives, and everybody here is primarily radio based. I'm internet based. So
Speak for yourself.
So
I'm internet-based.
I'm internet-based.
I know. But your costs aren't.
Yeah, no, they're not. You're absolutely right.
Your costs aren't. My costs are. So there is a significant difference when I look at the margins capable. Now, obviously, there's some disadvantages as well.
Oh, sure.
From an installation standpoint, it's not quick and easy. I mean, you just don't drop a radio in and walk out. You have to make the connection. But the point to that is that from a margin standpoint, the margins are much higher at that point. But there may be installations that are just not.
And you also have an advantage. None of us up here control our communication link. We rely on others, right? All four of us rely on either a cellular communication device or a telecommunication device or a cable device, some sort of broadband device to communicate. So we're at the whims of those companies, what they want to charge the consumer for those services. You have a direct relationship with your consumer as a telecommunications company. You get to control that communications link, and you get to reap that reward. Now, that's not true, unfortunately, of probably most of the other guys in the room. You're at the same whims that we are when it comes to, the way that we communicate back. And each of us have our own methodologies and our own relationships. But at the end of the day, none of us are in the telecommunications business. And so the recurring revenue that you're going to realize from our services have to do with the value that those services are bringing and not necessarily the methodologies they're using to connect the customer to their device.
I saw a question over here. Yes.
Speaking of POTS going away, speaking of radio versus IP, I know there's a whole session later this week on transmission systems, and it's a really important question. None of you are on that panel, though, so I'd like to get your thoughts on the ideal transmission system, both from a cost and sustainability standpoint, wireless, IP.
I wouldn't even attempt to answer it at this point. And it's not because I wouldn't want to give you an answer. I'll sit down over a beer with you and talk to you for half an hour, 45 minutes about it. There are so many aspects to give you that answer, I wouldn't even know where to start. There's that much information required to transfer to you. I couldn't do it in a short answer. I could not. But I'd be happy to sit and discuss it with you. I'd be happy to sit in the panel if they want me to come in and have an opinion. But that's a very, very broad question between internet radio and even private radio. There's just a lot there. I wouldn't give you a short answer. I wouldn't do it justice.
And I would certainly agree with Gordon. It's definitely not an easy question to answer, but I would say, and I think all of us up here would agree, that what we keep top of mind is that at our core, we're all offering security services, and we take very seriously the responsibility that we have to effectively deliver those services. And so we've got to rely on extraordinarily effective communications means to be able to do that. I think that's something that we're all very focused on. So as this debate sort of continues, that's really what we bring to the table, is trying to be singularly focused on making sure that we can deliver something reliably and securely all the time.
I mean, I would agree. I'm a little braver than Gordon, so I'll give you a little bit of a short answer. As the penetration of broadband becomes ubiquitous in people's homes, the same way that phone connections were ubiquitous in people's homes, there is a natural tendency towards another free link, right, in deference to my telecommunication gentleman here. There's an opportunity there because none of us in this room have to pay for that link. The homeowner's paying for it. And so it's an easy on-ramp to provide the services that we're providing. Now, there are issues, the same way there used to be issues with phone service. The phones would go out. I'm sure the argument is made that broadband services go out more often than phone services ever did. But at the same time, you're looking at an opportunity to be able to connect back to these services and have a large haul communication link. And so I think if you balance it properly and you make a business decision based on your demographics, the type of homeowners that you're dealing with, the type of services that you want to provide, that there are advantages to utilizing some of the broadband services that are already in your customers' homes. I'm sorry I'm not going to be here for Thursday. I'd love to hear what the experts have to say.
There is another session starting. We have time for one last question. Anybody else have one last question? If not, thank you, Ann, Dave, Avi, and Gordon. Great job. Appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody.